I've mentioned before that I'm not a bettor, a gambler, etc. Outside of like horse racing. I don't make enough money to prove to myself how unsmart I am by losing it. So I don't. I'm not a parlay maker. I don't bet $10 here or there. I just don't. I not much about this body type shouts self-control, right? So if I didn't have a wife, I might, and I probably would be face down in a gutter somewhere because obviously self-control, addiction problems, not a great mix for gambling. So if you don't ever start, you don't have to worry about it. But it is fun to look at and talk about, decipher, etc. And FanDuel has released the over-under win total projections, bet opportunities for the 2025 college football season. And I thought it'd be fun to take a look at them and talk about what the immediate reactions are, what the over-unders look like, and who's way too high, who's way too low. So according to FanDuel, Ohio State, Oregon, Notre Dame, and Penn State are at 10.5 wins, which is the 4 highest. And it feels like that's a lot in 2025 for all of them, I think. Maybe I might feel the most confident, truthfully, and it sure does feel like you're kind of going out on a limb there. But Penn State might be the one that makes me feel like, yeah, I would bet that Penn State wins 10.5 games in 2025. And I just think overall, I would maybe feel most confident in Penn State because Oregon's got a new quarterback, Ohio State's got a new quarterback, Notre Dame's got a new quarterback, and that's just not necessarily a recipe for winning 11 or 12 games time after time after time. It's not to say that they can't do that. I just think that if you were to ask, like, hey, would you put in it after the semifinal performance by Drew Aller? I recognize that putting your faith in Drew Aller might not be the smartest bet you can make, but would you rather put your faith in an experienced starting quarterback or 3 new starters? Going to go with the experienced quarterback, despite Julian Sand being a very highly touted prospect for Ohio State. Oregon and Notre Dame are going to have questions that need answered. So I would pick Penn State. I feel somewhat confident that they can win 11 games in 2025. And part of that is just it's not the murderer's row for the Nittany Lions in 2025. They're non-conference. Nevada, FIU, Villanova. You're going to be hard-pressed to find a weaker schedule in the non-conference in Power 4 football than that one. They don't play Michigan. They do play Ohio State, but it's on the road. So that's kind of the margin for error. I mean, they're UCLA, Northwestern, Indiana, Michigan State, Nebraska, Rutgers. It's not a murderer's row for Penn State by any stretch of the imagination. So I would say, yeah, I think Penn State wins 11 plus games in 2025. Then the 9.5s, there are 3 teams from the SEC and 1 from the ACC in Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, and Clemson. And similar to that 4 group of teams that had 10.5 wins as their schedule on their schedule, you have one school in Georgia who has quarterback questions. I think Texas, Arch Manning, you feel pretty good about Arch Manning going to Texas. Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee, Cade Klubnik at Clemson. Those feel like teams that are primed to be really good in 2025 because they are not replacing a coach, not replacing a quarterback. I mean, you could argue that Texas is replacing a quarterback, but Arch Manning did play significant stretches in 2024 due to injuries for Quinn Ewers. That's sort of the recipe for performing really well. And so when you are at the spot of good coach, good quarterback, is 9.5 out of the realm of possibility? I think you could argue that maybe for Georgia, Tennessee, just from the sheer fact that they're going to play a somewhat difficult schedule, makes it a little bit tougher to win 10 games. So I'm almost always going to say bet the under, but I would bet Tennessee at 9.5. Yeah, I would take the over. I would take probably Clemson at 9.5 over. Georgia and Texas, I'm not 100% sure. And it's sort of the same thing with the 8.5s of Alabama, LSU, Michigan, Indiana, Louisville, and Miami. Some of these, Indiana, Louisville, Miami, I would say, like, I don't want to say that Indiana was a flash in the pan, but a lot of things went right for Indiana in 2024 that enabled them to make the college football playoff, that enabled them to be a really good program. Is it sustainable at Indiana long term? Is Indiana going to be a playoff contender year after year under Curt Cignetti? I'll believe it when I see it, and not a second beforehand. I just don't believe that that is something that is going to be a regular occurrence. I don't believe that IU is going to be at or history doesn't tell you that is going to continue to happen. Now, like Penn State, Indiana has a bad non-conference. I mentioned Penn State being maybe the worst in Power 4. I don't know. Indiana's my Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, Indiana State. And Indiana gets the benefit of they don't play Michigan in 2025, don't play Ohio State in 2025. They play Oregon and Penn State, essentially. So unless Illinois is significantly better than I think they are, Michigan State maybe, Wisconsin, Indiana's going to be right at the 8-4, in my opinion. But I think they have to replace a lot, especially at the quarterback position, to be still really good. So I would say I think Michigan is going to be significantly improved in the second year of Sherrone Moore. I think Alabama is going to be at or where they were in the first year under Caleb DeBoer, which is 9 wins, which is the over. LSU is an interesting one because we could probably talk for 20 minutes today about Brian Kelly and how things maybe aren't going so great for him. I don't know about LSU. I feel like Louisville, Miami, Indiana are locks for unders. Just like I feel there's a group of 7.5 wins, USC, North Carolina, Kansas. I struggle with North Carolina and Bill Belichick because despite Bill Belichick's success as an NFL head coach, it is almost all tied to Tom Brady. And I don't know that I want to sit here and have that conversation of the chicken and the egg. Was it Brady? Was it Belichick? And it could be both. It could be that the pairing just worked so well for both of them. But Tom Brady succeeded outside of Bill Belichick, and Bill Belichick hasn't ever really succeeded outside of Tom Brady. And so, to assume that North Carolina wins 8 games in year number 1 feels a bit much. Sort of like there was talk that Deion Sanders was going to go into Colorado in year number 1 and put them on the map, and they didn't perform super well in year number 1 because, what he was dealt with sucked. The situation wasn't great, and they didn't perform well. But Kansas, North Carolina, and USC all at 7.5 wins. It's the over-under. I would take the USC in a they don't get the benefit of the. I mean, they a little bit get the benefit of the doubt from the Big Ten schedule maker because they play Michigan State, Michigan, Nebraska, Iowa, Oregon, which is a somewhat difficult stretch. Their non-conference, trash. Missouri State, Georgia Southern, and Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame on the road is not an easy game by any stretch of imagination, but Missouri State is a win. Georgia Southern is a win. Purdue is a win. Michigan State is a toss-up, but feels like a win. That's 4-0. And you got to get to 7.5. They then play Illinois, toss-up. Michigan's probably a loss. Notre Dame's probably a loss. I think Nebraska is probably a loss, but then Northwestern, Iowa, Oregon, UCLA. Can USC get to 8 wins? Yeah, I think so. So I would say USC, yes. North Carolina, no. Kansas, no. Florida at 6.5, Colorado at 6.5, Iowa at 6.5 are rough because Florida has, in my opinion, a team that could be a playoff caliber team in 2025. And I don't know if they're going to be I don't know that it's a slam dunk because we talked at length last year about how the final stretch of Florida's schedule and that if Billy Napier was going to make it out of there alive, it meant that they either really committed to him or really overachieved before that because their final 5 games were really difficult. Now they got the benefit that Florida State just fell off the face of the earth in 2024, where just things did not go well for Florida State during the season. And Georgia wasn't nearly as good as we thought they were going to be in 2024. So there were a couple of advantages. But in 2025, Florida has a relatively difficult schedule again. And you go at LSU, you're home for Texas, at Texas A&M, Georgia, at Ole Miss, Tennessee, Florida State, plus the non-conference games. I mentioned Florida State. They play South Florida, which is one of the, and I recognize that you can't sit here and be like, oh, South Florida, look out for the Bulls, baby. But South Florida is one of the better group of 5 programs. They play Long Island. Obviously not going to be a super difficult game, but then also at Miami, at the U. So at some point before their first bye game, it's not inconceivable that they are 3-1, 2-2, 1-3 with a win over an FCS program. Long Island, South Florida, at LSU, at Miami before a bye week. 2-2, 3-1 is best case scenario, it feels like, in that stretch. Then you go into a stretch of Texas, at Texas A&M, Mississippi State, before you get to another bye week. Can you go 2-1 in there? That would be best case scenario. Georgia, at Kentucky, at Ole Miss, Tennessee, Florida State to end the season in 5-game stretch. Is 3-2. So can Florida get to 7 wins? Yes, I think so. Does Florida have what is, in my opinion, college football playoff caliber talent? Yes. Can you put all that together to be 9-3, 10-2? I don't know. It sure sounds like a tough ask, but improvement certainly feels like it's on the horizon for the Gators in 2025. I would hammer the over-under that they get to 6.5 wins in 2025. Want to know your thoughts, your favorite team's win total. Do you think that you're underappreciated? Do you think you're maybe overestimated? Underestimated? Let me know in the comments down below. Would love to hear your thoughts about your favorite team. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.